The number one most important thing when you're starting is taking action. So to take action, you need to just pick a path and then go all into that path. Take massive action in that direction. As time goes on, you will pivot, ignore the noise, get laser focused, pick a direction. That direction can evolve as time goes on.
Welcome to the Short Term Show, the show about short-term rentals and long-term wealth, with real property owners hosting real properties who are crushing it in the vacation and short-term rental space. And here's your host, Avery Carl.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Short Term Show. I'm your host, Avery Carl, CEO and founder of the Short Term Shop, short-term rental real estate agents. So guys, we got a few announcements to make before we get to the episode today. So we are hiring a few positions, a recruiter, a sales manager, and then agents in the Smoky Mountains and Orlando. So if you have interest in any of that, email us at careers@theshorttermshop.com. As always, we really love your feedback. So please leave us a review on this podcast, because the more reviews we have, the better off we are to be able to keep this thing going for y'all. Follow us on Instagram at the Short Term Shop or me at the Avery Carl. Also, don't forget on Facebook, we have a free Facebook group. It's the same title as my book, Smarter Short-Term Rentals. Anyway, you guys are tired of hearing me announce things. So without further ado, we've got a super cool guest today. His name is Nathan St. Cyr. And something you guys have not heard on this podcast before, he invests in hostels, which I find very interesting. So how's it going, Nathan?
Well, aloha. It's going unbelievably well. I guess if I were to wake up here on the island of Maui and complain, I'd probably be in trouble.
Yes, I think you probably would. What part of Maui are you on?
I live at 4,000 feet elevation on the slopes of Haleakala, which is it's the large volcanic crater here on Maui.
Mhm.
So I kind of have a bird's eye view. I'm from Minnesota originally. I've spent my entire adult life here, but I feel very at home up here on the mountainside, where it's a little cooler during the day, and they call it the golden zone because it kind of stays between 67 and 77 year round, day, sunrise to sunset.
Oh, that's too cold for me, but I did actually in September do the Haleakala sunrise tour, and it was awesome. Like, I highly recommend that to anybody who goes to Maui.
Yeah. So when you turned up that road, that final little windy road to get to the summit, I lived right off of that road. So I'm way up there.
That's way up there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you got into investing in hostels?
Yeah, well, accidentally, frankly. It was a complete accident. My business partner and I, we'd been colleagues, we'd been in sales together, and we each had a passion for real estate. We'd done some things, but just, throughout life, right over the course of 20 years, we invested in long-term rentals, and he actually created. He had two short-term rentals here on Maui, and was absolutely crushing it. Again, we're out here on an island, so we were just doing our thing, and we're like, he ran into challenges with regulations and some of the things that we've faced here in the islands, and we knew that was not a real growth strategy here for us, and we wanted to do something together. And so we went and took we took an education course. I think it was like $700 or something, and we got educated on purchasing apartment buildings. We wanted to go into the multifamily space because we learned that we wanted to use commercial real estate as an opportunity to create long-term wealth, to really leverage up. And after we graduated, we went out to purchase our first apartment building, and we're like, hey, we're not really comfortable doing this remote thing where we're looking, we're out here on an island, and Ohio's a long way away from Maui. So let's start here. Let's just see what's here. And we made our first call together on an apartment building, and the agent said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it just went under contract, and they're not showing it." So we were like, "Okay, well." Um, we picked up on something in the special comments. It said, "This property was previously being run as a hostel." And we're like, what? I've been on Maui my entire adult life. I didn't even know what a hostel was, frankly. I kind of had this idea of these backpackers that did these cheap, dungy places. And the stigma of, I think what a lot of people think, they hear the word hostel and they're like, run down crap hole, whatever. And so I'm like, previously run as a hostel. And because we asked that question, the real estate agent was very smart. He listened and he was like, why were they so curious about that? And so he started sending us all of this information on how the US travel market was extremely far behind the rest of the world in this sector of hospitality. Well, one of the challenges with looking at apartment buildings versus what my business partner had been doing in his short-term rentals was that the margins, short-term rental margins, were just so far superior to what we looked at with apartment buildings. And so we're like, is there something here where we could actually take that short-term model and the margins that it generates, but then go and look at this different asset class? Because hotels weren't even on I don't think there's been a hotel traded on Maui for under $25 million in a decade. So we weren't even thinking about hotels. It didn't even seem like that would be possible for us. However, all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, is there this affordable way in which we could go and scale commercial property using the same margins that short-term rentals go and elicit? And after we dug in for quite a while and created a vision, we recognized that, yes, it is very possible.
Okay, I have so many questions. So you bought this property and you're
Yep.
like, I'm going to run this as a hostel. Okay, then what? Then what?
Okay. So first of all, we never wanted to just own one. Our concept when we did the research was that there was real opportunity within the U.S. marketplace. There's more hotels in the United States of America than any other country. However, the US doesn't even crack the top 15 in hostels. There's only 309 hostels in the US. So when we were doing our research, we weren't just doing research on, okay, is this something that's financially viable here on Maui? We really looked at this as, hey, if we went all into this vision, is this something that we could scale and expand? And so from moment one, the goal was, let's go create a prototype here on Maui that we can then go and grow with.
Okay. So I think the question on every listener's mind right now, as is mine. So on that first deal, like what do the numbers look like on a hostel? So what's your purchase price? What's your revenue? What does all that look like?
Okay. So we purchased this property for $821,000.
Oh.
And we are now number one. In 3 years, we became the number one small hostel in North America.
Okay.
In 18 months, we had it reappraised for $5.2 million. We have far surpassed that now in year 4 after being named the number one hostel and small hostel in North America. Our budgeted NOI for that property this year is $824,000. So we bought it for 821, and 4 years later, our budgeted NOI is more than that.
That's amazing. And just for people who are listening who might be a little bit new, can you clarify what you mean by NOI?
Yeah, NOI is really the most important number that we look at when we switch over to commercial real estate, because that's going to be the number that's your net operating income. And the greater your net operating income, the greater the valuation of your property, because they're going to take that divided by the cap rate for that asset type, they're going to divide that out. It's going to end up giving you the valuation of what a bank looks at as the value of your property using the income approach, or what a purchaser would look at purchasing that property for. So as you shift from a long-term rental or a short-term rental, that's, a lot of times you look at that asset class more from, okay, well, what is my cash flow? And then as time goes on, it may appreciate because time goes on or you put capital into it. But with commercial real estate, you take control over your ability to create value in what it's worth. And you do that by focusing on increasing NOI. And you can do that in one of two ways. When you increase NOI, you can either do it by taking whatever the income it's bringing in and increase that top line income, or you can do it by decreasing your expenses. And, great operators, they really look at attacking both. How do I increase my income, and how can I decrease my expenses? And you're doing those things that you can ultimately increase NOI. And that's what's so dang cool about hospitality versus other asset classes. Like, fundamentally, it works the same as an apartment building. However, with hospitality, it's so fun because you get to take your vision, and there's this overlying business of creating this experience. You really have the ability to pull so many unbelievable levers of that business to increase revenue, ADR, occupancy, experiences. All of these different things allow you to go and really affect, or what we would say is, hey, we can go force the equity. We can go increase the value of this property by doing these different things.
All right. So a lot of the same concepts you would use for like buying an apartment building or a hotel or any other commercial property. So I like that because that's not a big leap in terms of strategy. But I think where the big leap is that I'm interested in is the operation of it. So how many rooms do you have in this thing versus how many beds are in each room? Do you rent private rooms at all, or do you just rent beds? And what does that whole business model look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is one of the ways where we went in, and right away we were able to increase top line revenue by looking at bed configuration. And so both of our properties that we have here in the Hawaiian Islands, they each have about 75 beds. Okay, so they can occupy about 75 people. We'll use our Maui property as an example. That's the one that we built to be our prototype. It has a mix of, there's 20 rooms, and like rooms that you would think of as like a hotel room, an actual space. In those spaces, 8 of them are private, where you can just rent that room privately, right? And they have different configurations, either a queen bed, or they have sleeps up to 4, where they're configured so they can sleep 4 people. And then we have the other remaining 12 rooms are broken into anywhere from 4 bunk beds to 8 bunk beds. And then they are broken down into things like, all right, there's a 4-bed mixed gender, and then there's a 4-bed female only. So each one of the rooms then has different categories. Each one of those categories has different average daily rates and occupancies that go with them.
So how does it work? I've stayed in one hostel ever for like 2 nights in Barcelona. And I don't really remember a lot about it because that was longer ago than I would like to admit. But my question now is, when it comes to like guests' stuff, so their suitcases, their luggage, all these things, you have lockers, or how does keeping their stuff locked up when they're out, running around Maui work?
Yeah. So number one, we have an area that's for storage on Maui. We're actually in the process right now of redesigning each one of the rooms. When we did our second property, which is on another island, it's on the Big Island, we went and learned what guests really want out of everything that you just asked. Well, where does their stuff go? Where does their, all of those things. So when we did our renovation on our new property, we went and we had custom beds and storage made, where we looked at everything that a guest needs from, okay, where are they going to put their luggage when they come in? And then how can they secure it? So we have under the bed, they have very high ceilings in that property. So we have our beds, we were able to have taller. So underneath, we could take even the biggest luggage, and then we could put lock systems on it. We also have security systems where every single door has, lock systems on it. You get a code when you check in, after you check in, where you're the only one that can, you and the other people are the only ones that can enter that. We have a vast camera system, all over our property. So safety and security is paramount. And we have learned exactly what a guest actually needs from a smaller space and a shared space. And we rolled that out in our second property. And now we're coming back and making that same investment in our Maui property.
All right. And what type of travelers are usually renting this? So, in short-term rentals, you can usually expect like a group of friends, a small family. But what types of travelers are they typically international? Are they domestic? Who are we looking at here in your target demographic for a hostel?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I want to address the stigma of a hostel. Can we do that? Because your
Yeah.
listeners are probably like, hostel, like, dude, these are crap holes. Like, really? But I just want to address that first and foremost. If you go to howsithostels.com, I don't know if you put that in the show notes or not, but somebody can go in and look
Yeah.
at, this is not, when someone walks into our hostel on Maui, our prototype, a lot of times you'll hear, wow, or whoa. Like anytime we had hostel people come in the beginning when we were going through our design phase, um, people would come in and go, you guys are not hostel guys. So what we've created is much more, it's a boutique, swaggy. I mean, we're talking 12-foot murals across the entire thing that create an unbelievable feeling and experience. So I want to make sure and start with like, okay, we're not just a hostel, right? We created because we didn't have hostel experience, we did everything to our own personal standards. So as we talk about room configuration and we talk about making money and we talk about all of those things, well, that's not what really makes money in a hostel. It really starts with the guest experience. And I think that especially for listeners that have short-term rentals, like it's the way that you can run your short-term rental business and the way that we run our hostel, it's especially if you don't have experience, if you've never done this and you're like, oh, what am I, this is, well, the biggest thing that we did in the very beginning of designing this was we listened to the reviews of our guests. It was like paramount in us building this business was being like, okay, well, what do we can talk about the avatar, but of who now we're very hyper focused on. But it was like, well, but what do they want when they come and stay with us? What is it that they're saying about us? Like, where do we need to improve? Like, how we don't know anything about them. Why don't we just listen to them? And so, as you ask me these questions about what we've done, from room configuration to each one of these things, we're done with obsessing over the guest experience at the forefront of making that move. And so, I just wanted to kind of touch on that piece as we go through and look at the avatar. So, from an
Okay.
avatar, who are we focused on? And this is, so I am not our avatar. That's the bottom line. Had never stayed in a hostel. I've only stayed in one of our hostels one night when we went to create some content on our other property. I'm like, screw it, I'm staying here. I'm just, I am not our avatar. I'm old. We really focus on the 20 to 30-year-old. That's our main. I'd say 80% of the people that stay with us are between 20 to 30, and That is very unique because if you look at Gen Z, most of them are going to be Gen Z. If you look at them, what do they crave? They crave community. They crave real experiences. They crave not only having those experiences, but they also want them to look cool and they want to be Instagrammable and then they want to be able to show what they're doing.
Mhm.
And so that has been very paramount to the way that we've built our business. But the unique thing about that generation versus like me is I had this stigma towards shared in the US, right? It's like, oh,
Mhm.
Uber got created and I was like, there's no way I'm getting in some dude's car that he like drives to work
Yeah,
with. Like
yeah.
I'm not doing that. That's stupid. And now anywhere I ever
Yeah,
go,
I
like
remember when restaurants just first started having, like, big communal tables here and there, like, kinda hipster restaurants, and I was like, "Ugh, I don't wanna sit
that's
with other people.
disgusting.
I don't wanna sit with people I don't know," and now it's, like, totally normal. Yeah, yeah, same thing with Uber. Yeah, you're right, and then same thing with Airbnb, honestly, to start.
Airbnb paved the way for our business model. I mean, for the US, for changing. Look, this globally, we're so
Yeah.
far behind, but it did, right? Like Airbnb started, oh, you're going to rent a room in a home. But now, if you think about the generation Gen Z over the past 10 years, the person that's 28, they were 18, they've grown up in all of this. So shared accommodation, co-living spaces, cohab, all of these different things, their mindset is not like mine. And I sometimes I need to like, oh, jolt myself like, wait, they're not thinking about things the same way that I am. And so this business model really lends to number one, what matters to them. And community of a hostel is what makes a hostel. Every single thing that we do to really facilitate bringing people together to have experience. Like we want to have an environment where it doesn't matter who you are, you can come in and the one thing that you share in common is your desire to experience this world in these unbelievable places. And let's go connect and do it together.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, what would you say is the lead time on bookings on these things? Because I guess Maui, you would have to typically book a decent a ways out, just because you're not going to be going to Maui on the way to other things. So, what's the
33
lead time
days.
look like on these? Oh, okay, yeah,
There,
okay, so
well,
pretty quick.
well, okay, it is. So, but 33 days is the average. So, but we'll
Okay.
have, we will have people. If I pulled up our reservations right now, we have people booked into the beginning of next year, right? So, but that percentage is very small. The people that plan ahead for a hostel is very different than the way that somebody would book a hotel in general. Some people do, but when you look at the percentages of people that book over 6 months out, it's less than 20%. And then if you look at the percentage of people that book within a week, like you might be with your short-term rental, you might be like, dang, this thing isn't renting. Like we're not worried about it. We're like, we get inside a week and we're like, oh, it'll fill up because there is a
Yeah.
lot of very last minute booking because this is the solo traveler is a huge demographic and they're literally cruising from place to place, not exactly knowing where they're going to stay next. They could be on another island and be like, today I'm going to go to Maui. Where am I going to go? And then they book us right there in the spot. Or people come in and they're not exactly sure. They're like, hey, let's go to Maui. Not exactly sure where to stay. Hey, here's this cool hostel. Let's stay there and then figure out what our next plan is. And that's a big part of our approach is we offer daily adventures as we just facilitate them for free. So we have guides that take people out all over the island, have these unbelievable experiences. And so all of a sudden, people come stay. We create this community atmosphere. They're saying, oh, let's just stay for a night and then determine where we're going to go. Then they meet people. Then they know that tomorrow they're going to the road to Hana. Dude, if you take that tour, it's like $200. Let's do it with them. And they choose to extend their stay. So that is a huge part of our bookings is getting direct bookings from people that come to stay for a night, and then because they meet people, create this community, they stay together, and they have a freaking blast.
So 33 days, and then you get a lot of extensions and things like that. I have a couple questions around like the regulations of this. So was this a commercial property when you bought it, or was it like a residential single
No
family?
way. Yeah, absolutely commercial. So
Commercial.
look, yeah, this is key to our model. We purchase um, properties that are zoned for hospitality, and we
Gotcha.
target, first and foremost, we will target properties that are not just zoned for hospitality, but that are already operating as hospitality. So that's one of the one of the most difficult lessons we learned. Was the first property that we actually purchased. We purchased to convert, uh, and then COVID hit. They changed zoning regulations, and we ran into challenges with, public weigh-in and what have you. So, no, this is a key component to us identifying opportunity. These are commercial properties zoned hospitality.
Gotcha. Okay, that was going to be my next question is, do you focus on things that are already zone commercial, or are you trying to buy things in residential and running them? So, okay, so we are buying only commercial property for this, so you don't run into all of the anti short-term rental regulations, things like that.
Correct. And then the unique space here is that, a hostel has different, from a structural standpoint, a hostel has a different makeup. And because of that, a lot of times, the competition, you're not competing with people that are looking to, have a boutique hotel or hoteliers. Because there's shared bathrooms and there's shared kitchens. And because of that, the infrastructure cost to convert a hospitality asset and throughout it, put bathrooms in every single room and kitchenettes and all of that infrastructure, we're not competing with the people that want to turn it into a hotel.
Gotcha. Well, okay, quick question then. So, if there's no hotels in Hawaii that have been sold for less than 25 million in the last however long, what types of properties are you targeting that have these multiple spaces that you can then convert into a hostel, if not a hotel that's
Our
already zone hospitality?
So here in Hawaii, our number one target would be an existing hostel.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So there are existing hostels in Hawaii. I did not know that.
Yeah, there's existing hostels in Hawaii. We've both of our purchases, after we purchased our first commercial building to be a conversion. Then what we learned from that, we're like, okay, let's go target existing properties. And there's just the value proposition of us purchasing a existing hostel versus a hotel here in Hawaii is significant. Now, that's not necessarily the case everywhere.
Mhm.
So you could have a hospitality asset in a different market in the US where you could purchase that for pennies on the dollar versus what you'd purchase a hotel for.
Okay.
Hawaii is unique based on cost, barrier to entry, things like that.
And that's I love that this is what you guys have done, because you do have to find in the market that you're choosing to invest in the right strategy for that market, and it may not be the same across 100 markets. So I think that a big mistake that a lot of investors make is try to take a one size fits all approach and apply it to every market in the country that they might be looking at, when really you do have to kind of drill down and look at what the unique propositions of the market that you're buying in are.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And we really view hospitality like that as a whole, like, and assets as a whole. That's why we love hospitality. We'll look at any sort of real estate asset that exists, from, let's say, a piece of land, right? You've got a piece of land. Well, how do you get the highest and best use out of it? Well, you could look at a campground and be like, okay, well, here's a campground. It's just a piece of land that somebody rents, that there's camping spots that you rent for. Well, how could you increase the value of that? Well, that empty piece of land that's a campground, you could go and put glamping tents on. And you could, instead of just renting out the space as a campground, you could. So, how do you get the highest and best use out of whatever asset it is? We just find that bringing hospitality into it. If you look at a single family home, how do you get the best cash flow out of a single family home? Are you going to get it by a long term rental, or are you going to do it by bringing hospitality into it? And so, although hostels are one area of the hospitality market, the fundamentals are, we just believe so deeply in hospitality that the fundamentals really, they travel through any asset that you're passionate about. So if you're a listener and you're passionate about micro resorts, or you're passionate about short-term rentals, or you're passionate about purchasing a boutique hotel, or whatever it is, the fundamentals of this are the same. It's just, you have to find what is the asset that you don't need to necessarily change the asset. Find the asset that you get the most out of that asset.
I totally agree with that. And I think my last question about this specifically is, what do banks look at these as? Do they look at them as like a hotel? Because I know like down here in Florida, a lot of them are kind of not really wanting to mess with hotels right now. So what does it look like when it's a hostel?
Yeah, it's going to be very similar to a hotel. Now, for someone that's starting, look, we've proven our model out as expert operators. We're in the scaling process, so we have a, fractional CFO and all of these different things. So when we talk to a bank is going to be different than when somebody that has never done this before talks to a bank and they're like, "Hey, I want to buy this hostel." Right? The bank is going to look at them very, very differently than they're going to look at us. But they look at us in the same context that they would look at a hotel. Now, what they may look at differently, they may look at things like, okay, well, who would run this if you're not here? So we have to have a very strong plan in place. Like, if you as an operator, if you walked away, or they're going to look at things as, okay, well, maybe the cap rate is 7%, the valuation rate is 7% cap for a hotel, but because it's a hostel, we're going to value that at 8.5. So there are some differences, but because of our proof of concept and proving out being expert operators of multiple properties, we are looked at as consider us a hotel.
Gotcha. All right. So is there anything that I have not asked that you think our listeners would benefit from hearing about?
Well, I think that, again, we focused a lot on kind of the nuts and bolts of some of the investment part of it. But I really want to go back to that at the end of the day, no matter what hospitality asset class is, this all comes down to being able to execute an experience. And ours has really been made through obsessing over the guest journey. And so that concept of, okay, starting with being very clear in your hospitality vision and then obsessing over that guest journey, the rest of it really does take care of itself. All of these business things, room configurations, or what financial moves do we make, all of that only makes sense if you, first and foremost, if you've executed delivering the experience that is going to really create the value. And so, a lot of times I just want to make sure that as we go through this conversation, that people go, okay, well, this is not just about the dollars. The dollars came from the hospitality.
I totally agree with that. And I think that a lot of our listeners are going to be on the same page with that, because most of them are short-term rental investors or aspiring short-term rental investors, and giving a good experience really is at the top of, any of these hospitality asset classes. So 100% agree. So Nathan, we are to the last 3 questions of our show. We ask everybody these questions at the end of every show. First question is, what advice would you give 20-year-old Nathan?
To not do it alone. I spent the beginning years of my investing in real estate just doing it alone, and I know that had I have had community mentorship, coaching, whatever it was, that would have compressed time, and I would be tenfold where I am right now, had I have not just done it alone.
Gotcha. And number two, what advice would you give a new investor who's interested in getting started in hospitality investing in general today?
Well, first of all, ignore the noise. There's so much noise. And so I think that the number one most important thing when you're starting is taking action. So to take action, you need to just pick a path and then go all into that path. Take massive action in that direction. And look, as time goes on, you will pivot. You will find that shiny ball syndrome that's out there, that shiny ball, you can pivot later, things will, but if you're constantly with all the noise that exists, if you're constantly going from this to this to this and never taking that significant amount of action, you're never going to really create the first steps of success that you need to have that will create the momentum for long-term success. So ignore the noise, get laser focused, pick a direction. That direction can evolve as time goes on. So don't feel like you're stuck forever, but you gotta get focused and just move forward. There's a ton of ways to make money in real estate and in hospitality, but pick your direction and then go all in.
Totally agree. And last question, what's your favorite book that's impacted your mindset? I'm going to make a guess in my brain of what it is based on things you've said throughout this, but let me see if I'm right.
I'm going to guess that you're okay. No way. I'd put money. I'd give you very high odds. But anyway, so I'm going to mindset this past year, and I'm going to it's a back-to-back read because I am over everything else in life. I am a mindset coach and expert.
Okay, go ahead.
Psycho-Cybernetics followed by The Genie Within.
Okay, see, I was going to say Unreasonable Hospitality. So you got me. You win. I owe you a Starbucks or something.
Yeah. But look, Psycho-Cybernetics followed by The Genie Within.
Okay.
And I know that that's a weird name for a book, and it's like, oh, I'm not reading that just by the title. But
Sounds
as
very
far as
scientific.
it is, and in some aspects, but really, it's if you want to take control of the most powerful thing that you have, your mind, and more importantly, your subconscious mind, because it's open 24/7 and it's designed to actually go and create the life that you desire. Understanding it is important, and then following it up with The Genie Within gives you some just great some kind of hacks on how you can go and do this. So those are my most recent two favorites.
All right. Love that. I have not read either one of those, so I'll put those on my list. And last, so you have a whole podcast on this hostel investing idea, which I find super interesting, and I'm going to go listen. But for our listeners, tell us how they can find you, listen to that, follow you on all the social media.
Absolutely. So either Instagram or listen to our podcast, The Hotel Investor Playbook. And we really focus on the fundamentals of hospitality. So we look at hospitality from the standpoint of, acquisitions, funding, operations, and marketing. And so we focus on those four fundamentals through all of the different hospitality asset classes. So not just hostels, but boutique hotels, experiential stays, all of those. And everybody has somebody that's further along in their journey than they are. So we have on some pretty cool guests to help teach us along the way too.
Love that. So guys, definitely go listen to his podcast, follow them on Instagram. And Nathan, it has been a really, really interesting show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Aloha.